Welcome to chapter 19 of the book of Numbers, the law regarding the reddish heifer, parenthetical chapter, as far as being separated from the history chapters of the book of Numbers. This is a chapter dealing with another of the laws that God hands down to Moses and Aaron. It begins, "And the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying," this is a distinction of the law, "as many things as the Lord ordered, saying, speak to the sons of Israel," and always starts with this in the imperative, a sentence of what he is to do, to speak, tell them, and this is a part of the law, distinction, "and let them take to you an unblemished reddish heifer, which has not a blemish on her." I put the her, I had it before, but it's a feminine. The heifer is a female bovine family animal, which a yoke was not put upon her. So basically it's an animal that was like an oxen or a heifer, some animal that pulled the wagons and so forth, not a milk cow. Now, we see a lot of things, or I've seen a lot of things over the years in churches in the 1980s, 90s, of the return of the people, the Jews, into Israel, and they haven't set up a temple or a priesthood, and it's been this 1948, and this is almost 2020. So 70 years almost. A lot of people in the Christian world, when Israel became a nation, thought that Israel was going to be the end of all the things that God had planned, is going to be this wonderful nation, and they were going to do everything right, but yet they hadn't set up the temple and they hadn't set up the priesthood. But the Christian that believe that this is going to happen to bring back the Messiah, which I don't see. I think it's going to bring back the beast, but that they would show that there are people in Jerusalem that are preparing for this eventuality of a temple being rebuilt and the priesthood being reestablished, and they would tell you, well, that they're doing secret excavations on the Temple Mount and checking things out and measuring. And then the priesthood, they're making all the robes and everything for the priesthood, and they're making all the different altars and so forth. And then when they come up to the reddish heifer, they make this some kind of a bizarre thing in bringing that in. For some reason, they tie this story here, this command of the reddish heifer, into this eschatological information upon the end times. Now, God said to take an unblemished red heifer, unblemished, $2.99. Well, in Numbers 6:14, it mentions to take unblemished lamb, an unblemished ewe lamb, and an unblemished ram for the offerings. So something that's unblemished isn't unusual. Now I hear it, well, the Shabbat, which is a sort of a super conservative Jewish groups in the United States that teach the Bible and Judaism, they say that even the animal can't have a black hair next to a red hair and so forth. Really ridiculous things, because that would make it that would have a blemish on it. But an unblemished animal was not unusual. They had all these unblemished animals that they were using. That's what God wanted. So this, looking for this today and saying, oh, it's 1 out of 1 billion or something, and nobody, it's going to come miraculously. It's just all a bunch of hokey pokey that people have made up. And now the second one, the first one, the unblemished. Now, what is a blemish? A blemish, it talks about that in Leviticus 22, 22. And basically of a animal, of this type of an animal, it would be blind, broken, some broken limb or something, a tongue cut out, have warts, chronic mange, scabs, mutilated ears, tailless, crushed testicles, emasculated or drawn away. And that's all in Leviticus 22. So he didn't want a animal that was blemished in that way. And then the third was it had to be reddish, piran. Now you see the word pir has to do with fire. Pir, fiery color to it, reddish in the fire. Now red is erythros. It's number 2063. We have the Red Sea, and a lot of things are red. That is another red. This is reddish or ruddy. If you go into Gesenius in Wigrams and look up the word Adam, I think it's number 122, you'll see that it mentions it in 4 or 5 places. Again, in 2 Kings 3:2, it says fiery red as blood. So it would be a reddish color. But then in Songs 5:10, it says, my kinsman is white and ruddy. He's not bright red, he's ruddy. And then in Zechariah 1:8 and 6:2, it talks about the reddish horses, along with the same type of a reddish horse in Revelations 6:4, a fiery reddish horse. And then in 12:3, it talks about the reddish or fiery dragon. So all these things are not, to me, are not unusual to find an animal. They went out and found it. And so it says, and which a yoke was not put upon her. So it was not used yet for being a draft animal. Now, Shabbat, the Jews today make it, well, that it can't even have anything laid on it, not even a coat or any type of material. It had not, almost like to not have been touched. They make it into some real bizarre object that really wasn't really set up in the Bible, in which they do quite often. When Jesus came, he found that with the traditions of the fathers taking precedence over the Bible, the written word, and they used the oral law. And then it continues, and you shall give her to Eleazar the priest, and they shall lead her outside the camp, and shall slay her before him. So they take the reddish heifer, take it out, and then kill it, slay it, slice its throat, bleed it. And Eleazar shall take from her blood, and shall sprinkle before the front of the tent of the testimony. So he goes back in to where the tent is, and he sprinkles of the blood in front of the tent of the testimony of her blood, from her blood 7 times. So he's there and takes it and does that. He sprinkles it. As I think it said, sprinkles it, Ronnie. And then it says, and you shall incinerate her before him. Now, that is incinerating the animal before I suppose the priest, and her skin and her meats and her blood with her dung shall be incinerated. So they have to. Now, one thing it doesn't say about the animal, it does say it's a female, but it doesn't say how old it is. And in the Shabbat, they say it has to be 3 years old, which it doesn't say in the Bible here. So again, adding something to it. And then it says the priest shall take wood of cedar, hyssop, and scarlet, and put it in the midst of the burning of the heifer. Now this was for some reason, God chose these 3 things, and the only other place that they also appear is in the blood of the small bird that was dipped into this blood that had these 3 things in it for the sacrifice for the leper. And it's earlier in the chapter. And so here they take the same 3 and they put it in the fire and they're burning the heifer. And then it says the priest shall wash his garments and bathe his body in water, and after these things shall enter into the camp. And the priest shall be unclean until evening. So he goes and burns the heifer and then washes his clothes, washes his body, but he can't go bathe. He's not going to be unclean until evening. But then he can enter into the camp. And the one incinerating her, well, I guess the priest led the animal, and the one incinerating her shall wash his garments in water and shall bathe his body and shall be unclean until evening. Apparently there was 2. The one led the animal and the other did the burning of it. And a clean man shall gather together the ashes of the heifer and shall put them aside outside the camp in a clean place. So someplace that doesn't have any, not like dead bodies or anything that made it clean, unclean. And he takes all these ashes of the buckets of it, probably a couple buckets maybe, and it says, and it shall be for the congregation of the sons of Israel for preservation. It is a purification water of sprinkling. So apparently they have water and they take the water and they bring the ashes together, and it's going to be for a purpose. And the purpose is, and it continues and it says, and the one gathering the ashes of the heifer shall wash his garments and will be unclean until evening. And it will be to the sons of Israel and to the foreigners lying nearby in the midst of you an eternal law. So 2,000 years, of course, the Jews haven't done this one either. They could have taken at least that they have, I've not heard of it, but they don't have a priesthood, and I don't know how they would do these things. And the one touching any departed soul of a man having died will be unclean 7 days. So this all is for a person that's touching a dead body or a grave of a dead person, so forth, for the cleansing of that person. And it says, this one shall be purified on the 3rd day and the 7th day, and he will be clean. But if he should not be purified on the 3rd day and on the 7th day, he will not be clean. And everyone touching of the one having died of a departed soul of a man, if he should die, and the other should not have been purified, the tent of the Lord is defiled, and that soul shall be obliterated from Israel, for water of sprinkling was not sprinkled upon him. He is unclean. So the 3rd and the 7th day, they take that water that has the ashes of the red heifer, sprinkle it on the man for those 2 times. After the 7 days, he will be clean. If he doesn't do that, he's in a state of uncleanliness and will cause others to be unclean. And if he does that, then that soul shall be obliterated. And what obliterated is, either put to death or separated from the Jews. His uncleanness is still with him. And this is a law. It's a law, the red heifer. A man, if he should die in a house, well, this is, I guess, would be the second law of it, the law of the death. And if a man should die in a house, everyone entering into the house, and as many as are in the house, will be unclean 7 days. And every item being open, as many as have not been bound with a bond upon it, is unclean. And all, whoever should touch upon the face of the plain of one slain, like during a war, or of a dead corpse, or of a bone of mankind, or a tomb, 7 days he will be unclean. And Jesus uses the figure of how the Jews were doing all these things to be clean, but yet they didn't worry about on the outside, but they didn't worry about the inside, on their heart, the feelings of the heart. They had adultery and hatred and all sorts of things, and he was saying they're like people that were walking over the tombs of people that were unmarked and not knowing it, and they're unclean because they were walking on the tomb. And so this is how he related that to them, to these Pharisees. And then it continues, and they shall take for the unclean people some of the ashes of the thing, having been incinerated for the purification, and shall pour out upon it living water into a utensil. So living water is running water, a cistern or not a cistern, a well or a river or stream. And they'll take that water, not a cistern, that's stale water. And a clean man shall take hyssop and shall dip it into the water and sprinkle about upon the house and upon the utensils and upon the souls, as many as it might be there, and upon the one touching the bone of mankind, or of the slain, or of the one having died, or of the one of the tomb. So this clean man. Now, whether that's a Levite or not, I would think it would be, but somebody definitely had to be Levitically clean. And the clean man shall sprinkle about upon the unclean on the 3rd day and on the 7th day. And that person shall be purified on the 7th day, and that person shall wash his garments and shall bathe in water, and he will be unclean until evening. Now, that's not the man who came in and sprinkled, but the person that had the sprinkling being done for them. And a man, whoever should be defiled, touching the dead person, and shall not be purified, that soul shall be utterly destroyed from out of the midst of the congregation, for he defiled the holy things of the Lord. For the water of sprinkling was not sprinkled upon him. He is unclean. Now, I don't know in Israel if they still do this, if a rabbi goes out and sprinkles, and I don't know. I could have looked it up, but I didn't. And it shall be to you an eternal law. They should be doing it. And the one sprinkling about the water of sprinkling, now that person that went around sprinkling, shall wash his garments. And the one touching the water of sprinkling will be unclean until evening. So now that person has to clean. He'll be unclean for just that one day, apparently, or the 2 days, the 3rd and 7th. And anything, whatever, should be touched by him, the one being unclean, shall be unclean until evening. So if he's done all these things and touched anybody, then that person will be unclean until evening. Now, the next chapter, we go back into the history, the water of dispute, again, the grumbling and so forth. We'll find out what that's all about in our next video seminar, in chapter 20, and hope you'll continue with us. And till then, God bless.